So I decided to make this guide here for people who are struggling a little bit when it comes to playing the Feral Druid, at least when it comes to survivability and when it comes to dealing damage as a Feral Druid. And it is a guide meant towards people who are, let's say, people who are still getting into the Feral, that doesn't quite understand how you're supposed to play Feral when it comes to gameplay, when it comes to your setup, in order to get, good performance, especially when it comes to PvP gameplay. And before we get into this guide, like completely into it, I do need to make a small disclaimer, which is I am the type of player who likes to play this game in a way that, I just grab whatever gear is high item level. That's the way I play the game. But a lot of the guides on the internet, whether it being video guides on YouTube or written guides, they're gonna tell you that gear matters a lot when it comes to Feral Druid. And I don't think people quite understand why gear matters so much when it comes to Feral Druid. And I know you're about to click away from the video because you probably, like the many other people who are still struggling with Feral Druid, are thinking to yourself, well, you hate when other guides tell you gear matters and it's going to be everything when it comes to playing the Feral Druid. Now, the thing is, I have some good news and some bad news for people who are like me, people who doesn't want to go grind for specific pieces of gear with specific stats on it or specific Azerite traits, because it's such an annoying thing if you're not interested in that sort of thing. I do have some good and bad news. The good news is that it's very easy to fix a Feral Druid. It's very easy to get the gear that you need. Now, the bad thing about Feral Druid is that many of the things you've heard online when it comes to playing Feral Druid is actually true regarding, gear being a very important factor when you play the Feral Druid. Feral Druid is not like other classes. If you were to pick up most classes in the game, most specs in the game, and you just grab whatever gear is high item level and you just pick whatever Azerite trait seems to be the best in that piece of Azerite gear, you'll do, okay. You're not going to be unplayable, but you'll do okay. Whereas if you then decide to actually go out and get the exact Azerite gear or the exact stats on your gear that you need to have for those specific classes, you go from being average to good. Whereas Feral Druid works in a little bit different way. Feral Druid, if you just grab whatever gears out there and you just grab whatever trait you think seems nice on paper, you don't go from average to good, you go from broken to good. Like, there's a huge jump on Feral Druid when it comes to gear, and like I said, it's actually very easy to get your hands on this gear. I will go ahead and put up a small, let's say like a visual guide at the end of the video that actually tells you where to go and get the specific gear that you need. It's going to be pretty beginner friendly, and it's going to be very easy for you to follow. So I hope this is something that isn't gonna terrify you, because it's very easy to get the gear that you need. I'm a casual player in this game. I managed to get the gear, and actually, just to point it out, I wouldn't be surprised if you already have most of the right stats in the gear that you need to have, and I wouldn't be surprised if you have pretty much the correct Azerite traits that you need to have, but you've been using it wrong. Because it's not just enough to have the right Azerite traits, you also need to know what exactly changes in your gameplay when you get the right Azerite traits, because that's a very important thing about Feral Druid. So with that said, let's actually go and talk a bit about the actual thing that you came here to learn about. I've been ranting for a couple of minutes now, but I think it's important that you get in a place mentally where you're prepared for what I'm about to say, because if you're like me and you don't like grinding for specific gear, I need to make sure that you are aware how important it is to get the specific gear that you need, okay? So let's go ahead and talk about the actual gear and why Feral Druid goes from broken to good if you get the right gear, because that's very important to note here if you need to understand why it's so important. Now, this is a freshly leveled Feral Druid I have right in front of me here. This is not my main. This is a freshly leveled Feral Druid. And I wanted to prove something to you because I have 3 Feral Druids in the game. And after leveling them, after just grabbing whatever gears in the game, I actually, by going inside my stats here, I have most, critical strike, and mastery. These 2 are very important for you to have in order for you to deal good damage. A lot of people are gonna tell you that versatility is important, because versatility is going to decrease the amount of damage that you take, and it's also going to increase the healing that you receive from your healing spells. But the thing about survivability is that our Azerite trait is going to pretty much take care of all that for us. We don't have to worry about defensively when it comes to our stats here. Of course, if you get to a really high item level at some point where you do have the room, the space to actually put some point into versatility, by all means do it. But it's very important to point out that critical strike and mastery are the two important ones here. Mastery is just overall going to increase the damage that you do from your bleed abilities and your finishing abilities. Meaning that, you know, all the bleeds we pop on our opponents and the ferocious bite at the end is going to get a huge buff with mastery, so it's very important. Now, critical strike is also hugely important because our ferocious bite in itself can be good with good mastery, but it's not amazing if you don't have critical strike. So it's very important that you have critical strike. It's very important that when you do actually, you know, have all this damage coming out from ferocious bite, that you crit on those bites. That is a huge part of Feral, and it's so important if you want to deal good damage with Feral that you critical strike. So you need to have it. And like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if you opened up your character right now and actually noticed that critical strike and mastery are the ones you have the most of, because I have leveled, like I said, 3 Feral Druids. They all end up having critical strike and mastery. I didn't even have to work for it. I just opened up my character when I realized some time ago that, oh, so these are the important things to make your Feral good. I opened up my characters and I noticed, well, okay, I have critical strike and mastery. No need to worry about that. Check. Okay, so it's very easy to get your stats right. If you don't get your stats right, again, go into the adventure guide, look up dungeons. I'll just pick a random one here. So we can actually go and look through these. Critical strike mastery, there's a lake there. That's a really good lake to have. So that is one way to get stats, which, well, is pretty much the only way to get stats. It's to look for that specific gear. But that's not really the important part, because stats is all good and stuff, but like I said, we hate going out grinding for specific gear. Instead, we need to focus on Azerite traits. The thing about Azerite traits is that we have a specific defensive cooldown called Survival Instincts. Survival Instincts reduces all damage you take by 50% for 6 seconds, and you have 2 charges of it, meaning that we get 12 seconds out of it. Now, the thing about Survival Instincts is that right now, because it only lasts for 6 seconds times 2, we have to use it in those, you know, oh crap, I'm about to take a lot of damage sort of moments where, let's say, a paladin uses his wings or something, maybe get stunned, and you have to anticipate that you're getting stunned, and then you use it straight away. It's not a very good defensive because it lasts for only 6 seconds, and this is your main defensive, which is weird, right? So the thing is, if you were to have a Azerite trait called Masterful Instincts, it actually completely changes how your Survival Instinct spell works. What it's going to do, let me just open it up here, it looks like this. It has a small, what do you call that? It has a wolf icon inside of it. What it does is that after those 6 seconds expire on your Survival Instincts, it adds another 30 seconds of Masterful Instincts, which is going to give you a buff to your mastery, which means we get increased damage, and it's also going to increase your armor for 30 seconds. We're not talking about just a little bit of armor here. We're talking about if you have Masterful Instincts on all your Azerite gear, like 1 on each piece, you have more armor than a paladin. It's amazing. It's insane how much it changes things. So before, when we were to go into a fight with somebody and we would, you know, open up on them, start fighting them, we would actually be looking for, is he about to burst his attacks on me? Is he about to use his offensive cooldowns? Oh, he is. Okay, then I'm gonna use it. Whereas now, with Masterful Instincts, it changes your gameplay style, because now, when you go into an opponent, you know, usually I would have Blood Talons on because I have to mention it, otherwise people in the comments are gonna say, why are you not using your Blood Talons in the beginning? And I'll be like, well, I'm just showing off things right now, so. But usually you go to an opponent, we stun him by opening up with a rake, and as soon as he gets out of the stun and starts attacking us, that's when I want to use my Survival Instincts, because now you can see I have it up here, it counts down from 6 seconds, and now it changes to Masterful Instincts. If I were to go and take a look at my armor, you can actually see that right now I have 4,217 armor. Now, once that expires in about 18 seconds, it's going to highly reduce that and make me a lot more squishy, meaning that I'm gonna die a lot faster when I fight somebody. My armor has been increased by more than 100% right now. which is amazing. So you need to make sure that you focus on getting Masterful Instincts, and it's very easy to come by. See, now I only have 1,900 armor, barely 2,000, and I had more than 4,000 before. So it changes quite a bit. So talking about getting this Masterful Instincts, you would think that you need to grind for like 1 or 2 specific dungeons or something to get this gear. But it's actually not like that. Most of the content in game I've noticed is actually going to give you Masterful Instincts. It's only a few select dungeons that will not give you the Masterful Instincts on your Azerite gear. So it's very important that you, and again, I will give you sort of a visual guide at the end here what to avoid if you don't want to like do dungeons that are just not going to drop anything for you. But it's very important that you focus on getting Masterful Instincts on at least 2 pieces of gear. 3, if you can, would be awesome. But you need to have it on at least 2 pieces of gear. It not only changes your survivability, it changes your gameplay style completely when it comes to your defensive play. So with that said, you need to have at least 2 Masterful Instincts to make a quite a big difference. We also need to focus on getting something called Jungle Fury. Now, I do not have any Jungle Fury on this freshly leveled Feral Druid here. I do have another Feral Druid that has 2 Jungle Furies and 2 Masterful Instincts, and I just chose to exchange a Masterful Instincts with a Jungle Fury because I wanted damage over survivability there. You need to make sure that you choose Jungle Fury and have roughly 2 of them on your Azerite gear. In some cases, you have to choose between Masterful Instincts and Jungle Fury, and then you have to just sort of judge for yourself, well, do you only have 1 Masterful Instincts on all your gear right now? Because then you probably need the 2nd Masterful Instincts. Do you have already 2 of them on the other gear? Well, maybe you should focus on getting more damage by using Jungle Fury. What Jungle Fury is going to do is that it's going to increase your critical strike with Tiger's Fury, which means that you're going to, again, pump a lot more damage out when Tiger's Fury is active. And this is something that we all want to combine. When we use our rotation, we of course want to combine Tiger's Fury, our Ferocious Bite. So you just need to make sure you in general pump out a lot of damage when it comes to Ferocious Bite. Ferocious Bite is the important attack here. That's the one that's going to kill your opponents. Not all the bleeds. The bleeds are just there for pressure. In a lot of cases, you'll actually notice that opponents can out-heal your bleeds. It's the Ferocious Bite we want to critical strike with. That's the one we want to make sure we deal damage with. So with that said, let's really quickly just go over the talents here. When it comes to your talents, I have built my setup for Ferocious Bite. Ferocious Bite is your main offensive cooldown. That's the one you need to use. It's not even a cooldown, it's just a finisher that you can use anytime you get a certain amount of combo points. It's very important that you always use it only at 5 combo points. I'll get to that in a second. But the reason you want to make sure you talent into Ferocious Bite is because this talent tree here with the stats here is going to be dependent on it. So for the first row, I have Sabertooth, which is going to buff, you guessed it, Ferocious Bite by 20%. And it's going to refresh the duration of Rip on your target, which is also a nice little bonus thing. It's not really the important reason why we want to choose Sabertooth, but having that is a good thing. I also decided to go with Soul of the Forest down here, not Incarnation. Incarnation is more if you are doing one-on-one fights and you're expecting there to be a long period between your fights, whereas if you're in a situation where you need to be constantly fighting, then Soul of the Forest is better. Also because it will increase the damage of your Ferocious Bite. So this is definitely the talent I will go with this setup here. We do also want to focus on Blood Talents, because Blood Talents, again, if you use it right before Ferocious Bite, is going to increase your, you guessed it, Ferocious Bite by another 25%. So it's very important that you use this one right before your finisher. The second Blood Talent you should probably be focusing on using on one of your bleeds, preferably Rake if you can do that. And then if you were to talk about PvP talents over here, you can see that again, I chose Ferocious Wounds, which you guessed it, is going to buff your Ferocious Bite by decreasing the opponent's maximum health by a certain percentage, and it stacks 2 times. So this is a really good one to combine with Ferocious Bite, and this is also the reason why you need to make sure you have 5 combo points when you attack your opponent. Also because there's no need to like heavily focus on buffing Ferocious Bite if you're not going to utilize the 5 combo points. Make sure you get as much damage out there. Now, if you were to look at some PvP guides online, they will tell you that Cyclone is a mandatory PvP talent. If it is in a fight where you fight against a team that has a healer on it, or if you're fighting, in battlegrounds and that sort of thing, it can be good to have, and it has a lot of situations where it'll be very useful in, because you can pretty much shut down somebody's healer on a team or something. But in open world PvP, if you want to do 2v2 with, 2 damage dealers against 2 damage dealers or something, or just something, one-on-one, it's not really the one I would go with. Instead, I would actually go and choose Thorns, which is a really good ability to sort of make your opponent back off a little bit if they're melee fighters. If they're really stupid and they still attack you with Thorns on, it's pretty much a win there for you. So having Thorns is really good when it comes to melee fighters. Leader of the Pack is also one that I would highly recommend. It increases your critical strike chance of pretty much everyone around you for 40 yards by 5%. This means that, again, we want to make sure we get critical strikes with, you guessed it, Ferocious Bite. And it does make a difference. I did test it out. It makes a huge difference. It will give you a good chunk more of damage output, because you will critical strike quite often with, this setup here. So it's very important that you get as high critical strike as possible. Again, some of these can be arguable, but this is the setup that I would recommend when it comes to your talents. With all that said, let me just go ahead and open up my adventure guide here, because I want to show you all the different dungeons we have in BFA right now. In these dungeons that I've highlighted here, you can actually see that I sort of highlighted some of the dungeons, which dungeons you should go to for, let's say, a chest piece that has Masterful Instincts on it, which ones has a headpiece with Masterful. I've sort of made a visual guide here that was a little bit easy to follow, so you know where to go if you want specific gear. This is just to make things easier for people who are not sure about where to look up things. Again, there's a lot more content out there that will give you stuff with Masterful Instincts on it. But for example, benthic gear from Nashatar that you can buy using mana pearls. Some of those will give you as well. From my experience, the headgear is not going to give you. The chest and the shoulder piece will give you Masterful Instincts. So maybe stay away from the headpiece if you're looking for that. If you go to the Azerite vendor, the one where you can use your, what is it called? The one where you can go and use your Titan Residuum. Residuum, it's called. They will also drop you pretty much Masterful Instincts when you buy gear from there, so that's a really good place to go as well if you have some of that to spare. If you don't know where that is where your transmogger is in any sort of major capital in BFA. So go there and just sort of get the gear that you think you're missing in order to get that specific trait there. With this said, I think I will end off just sort of showing again what you're supposed to be doing when you fight somebody, because the thing that I hear a lot of people say when it comes to fighting, let's say in a PvP fight, I'm against an opponent here. If you go online to forums and say, oh, I have trouble staying alive with Feral Druid, a lot of people are going to tell you, well, Feral has mobility, you need to use that to your advantage, or you need to make sure you use bear form correctly. Like, that's what they will tell you. But the thing is, a lot of those people giving you those tips are probably not Feral players. So they're going to give you those tips because they don't know what they're talking about. If you have Masterful Instinct set up, you will not need to use bear form most of the time. Only in situations where you can tell you're about to take a Chaos Bolt to the face by a Warlock, or a Paladin is popping his wings on you and you just need to sort of ride it out until the wings are gone, that's when you want to use your bear form. But let's say I'm fighting an opponent. First I want to use my Blood Talons, because I know people are going to write my ass about it if I don't say it. Gonna go into stealth, you're gonna walk up, stun your opponent, apply bleeds. Again, I used Tiger Spirit at the beginning there, I know the stun there because I talented into it. Boom, boom, boom. Now I wanna use it. Now I'm using my defensiveness because I want to make sure Survival Instincts is up now, because I'm probably about to get smashed by the person. He's probably gonna use this opener. And then you just sort of continue your, again, my bleeds, they wore off because I was talking. But then you just wanna continue using your rotation. If you have any doubts about rotation, I do have another video that talks about the rotation for the Feral Druid. Don't mind that it's a little bit older than this year. It's the beginning of this year, I'm not sure. Because back when I made that guide, I was telling people to use a specific rotation, and everyone was telling me in the chat, no, that's not the way you need to use the rotation. And what happens just about half a year later? Everyone's using my rotation. So, it's pretty valid, my other guide, if you want to watch it. So Go watch that guide if you need help when it comes to at least single target rotation with your Feral Druid. I don't talk about Azerite gear or stats in that one. I just simply focus on rotation and how to get that working. I think I'll end off the episode here just with a couple of different scenarios of me actually fighting somebody in PvP, just to sort of demonstrate that it actually works, that I don't die very easily. I'm probably not gonna be using this druid here. You know what? No, I will use this druid here. This is my freshly leveled Feral Druid. He doesn't have very high item level. I will use this druid to sort of prove a point here. So I'll use this one, I'll put some clips in, and you can just sort of see what's going on there. So I hope you enjoyed this guide and found it useful. Subscribe if you haven't yet, if you feel like getting more content that you want to see from me. And I hope you have a nice day.
Two for a win.